So, what does a coral reef and a mining haul truck and your bank account all have in common? And why does ignoring the small warning signs always end the same way? By the end of this episode, you'll understand why financial problems rarely arrive suddenly and how to spot the warning signs before they become disasters you can't ignore. You'll walk away with a completely new way of looking at your financial life and a simple habit of checking the small things before they become expensive problems. I'll start the episode by talking about a time when I was a newly minted tradesman and I'd moved to the Pilbara. I'd been given a job to go and do an inspection on a conveyor and a chute. I went down and had a look and I saw a small trickle of dirt and dust coming from the side of the chute. It was tiny, about as significant as a dripping tap. Easy to ignore, no big deal, right? However, 4 days later, that small trickle had turned into something much bigger. The wear hole had grown, material was pouring out of the chute, and there was a pile of dirt underneath that was almost as high as a house. Big failures rarely start big. They usually start as small problems that nobody thinks are important. I learned that lesson on a mine site in the Pilbara, but it took me a lot longer to learn the same lesson about my own finances. I did exactly the same thing with my credit cards that I did with that chute. I saw the warning signs, the balance creeping up, the interest appearing on the statement. It wasn't urgent, it wasn't a crisis, so I ignored it. Until one day I looked at my statement and realized that I was paying hundreds of dollars every month just in interest. Money gone forever, buying me absolutely nothing. The hole had grown, the pile of dirt was as high as a house. I'd like to introduce you today to my guest. She has spent 25 years as a marine scientist studying the most complex living systems on the planet, coral reefs. She's been to Antarctica as part of a global women's leadership program. She runs Reef Check Australia, and she's recently founded something called the Element of Play, which is all about helping high-performing people recover from burnout before they break completely. Her name is Jodie Salmond, and I think what she's going to share today is going to hit closer to home than you expect. Thank you for joining me today, Jodie. It's great to have you on the podcast.
You're very welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
Jodie and I are from completely different worlds. She studies coral reefs and I plan the maintenance schedules for mining equipment. But when we sat down and talked, we realized we both had learned the same lesson the hard way. And it's the same lesson that most tradies learn the hard way with their money. Small warning signs, often ignored, become big expensive problems, whether it's a trickle of dirt from a chute or whether it's a coral reef showing early signs of stress. Whether it's a super fund that wasn't quietly claimed what it wasn't doing what it claimed to be. Whether it's a credit card balance that seems manageable until it isn't. The warning signs are always there. The question is whether you're paying attention. Now, you've got some interesting stories, Jody. Yeah, I'd like you to share your story of what your financial experiences and also your experience that led you to developing your book was the element of play. Is that right?
Yeah, it is. That's correct. And there's a couple of intertwining stories there. And what I find first and foremost quite fascinating is, as you mentioned, we've come from very different backgrounds. And yet, regardless of that, there's always those commonalities, which I feel you can always find across every human everywhere, right? You'll always be able to find some common ground. And in
Yeah.
our case, when we were talking about financial components, I thought that was quite fascinating. So a few years ago, I, like everybody else, have been diligently putting super into my super fund. And I actually tried to make a change because I wanted to do the rollover. I wanted to make all of my super accounts that were apparently everywhere into one. And I had set aside some like sufficient time to actually do the research and make sure I chose one fund and rolled it all into one. Now, whilst I did that, I actually used a very well-known website to actually compare different programs. And then very quickly, you know how you have to always put your emails and your phone numbers and things in there. It found that I actually only had two super funds. So it was fine. That was nice and easy. I'll roll them over. And then I got a phone call to confirm what I had found, etc. And so I had actually sat with the owners, met the managers, met the entire team, had several different phone calls, and decided to put all of my super into this one fund because it actually met all of the requirements that I'd set for myself. And in particular, again, my background is environment. So I was really looking at an environmentally focused kind of group for super. Fast forward about 18 months, and all of that super has gone. So And I'm not the only one. There's several thousand Australians that were actually impacted by that, resulting in billions of dollars across the country that's actually been lost. But essentially, what happened is after a lot of tears, not going to lie, a lot of tears, and then also really trying to work out what the next steps were. Because what do you do if all of your retirement plans have disappeared in one hit and not because of your own inactivity, etc.? So that was a pretty tough call. So shortly after that, what I actually ended up doing is I signed up for a wealth mastery course. I did that through Tony Robbins. I'd signed up a couple of years prior. I've been doing his courses for years. And I'd already kind of been looking at, right, what do I have to do? Now, this massive event had occurred. And so very quickly, I'm like, well, I needed a kick in the butt, right? Obviously, something wasn't working and my strategy's not working. And so I really had to start looking further afield. So fast forward again another 6 months, and I'd signed up for a couple of courses that we actually found out we're the same. We're doing the same kind of coursework. And from that, I actually had thought of writing a book. Not just about that experience. And actually, if I'm fully honest, I don't even think that experience is documented in the book at all. And from it, though, was this idea of like that really helped pile on the amount of burnout when I was dealing with all of this super stuff as well. And I realized that actually there's some key elements that we really miss when we're deep in the trenches and we're burnt out, we're exhausted, we don't know where to go, we have no direction. And from all of that, I just started writing. And from that, the element of play was born because I very quickly realized that, look, I know it's really easy to say it's just money. It's a very big hit, 100%, but also I'm alive, I'm healthy. And so I was really trying to look back and go, what are the wins here? And what can I do to help other people, right? If anybody's in even a remotely similar situation, whether that's financial or burnout or anything else, how can I help? And yeah, so a book was written, a coursework is written, and all sorts of things are coming out of it, which is fantastic.
Wow, that's a really honest story, and it sounds brutal to have lost all your people like that. So thank you for being vulnerable and sharing like that. But I'm really pleased to hear that even though it's such a huge hit, you're able to get some good out of that in the your book and you're dealing with burnout and things like that. Were there any warning signs that happened that you perhaps saw, or was, in terms of your super, does anything that gave you any clue? If you look back, were there any flashing lights?
Not with my super. And that's what I guess for me was really disappointing. Like, it's one thing to be able to beat myself up and go, I was not diligent. I didn't do my due diligence on any of this. I just said yes. But actually, they had SOPs, like standard operating procedure that documents. They had absolutely everything. I met with the team, not just once, but several times. So I actually knew the members that were dealing with my particular fund. We had spoken about what I was after, and they had suggested funds based on what would actually work for me. So, in terms of that communication effort, I actually thought that they were quite on top of it. So, on that side, no red flags. The only thing that happened is literally an email popped out of nowhere and said, just to let you know, you've lost all of your super. I'm going to be the caseworker. You're going to have to go and see a financial planner. And they had said, you're lucky if you'll get a cent out of the dollar back. Like, you won't get anything back. And this is going to take 5 to 10 years. So again, I'm quite aware of myself. And so I actually brought my partner with me the second time. I was like, I can't handle this. Like, I know I need someone else to listen to the facts because I'm very emotive. I'm not going to record it, but I need someone else to know what's going on so that when I ask questions, you can walk me through it because I just don't think I'm going to take all that information in. And full disclosure, like, it is still going on. There's chatter every single day, and there's a lot of people that are struggling. And so it's not just that financial component, it's actually the mental health component. So it's very much again about communication and community and making sure other people are well. And so it's really interesting, especially like we said, we don't necessarily have overlapping jobs, but when you talk about some of those underlying factors, that's really important. So from the financial side, no red flags at all for me, not in that super case anyway.
Wow, yeah. Um, like from what you've explained, that's way more due diligence than I would ever have done. So to my mind, I thought there's probably nothing much else you could have done in that case. I am a very big advocate, though, of taking control of your own super, and the horse is bolted in this situation. So I don't want to say it to make you feel bad, but one of the points I do to
Mm.
try to make to the people that I'm teaching is if you're not in control, you're not in control. They can have all the rules and regulations and laws and all that sort of stuff, but bad people, if I can use that term, will find a way around them to do bad things, or people that are irresponsible will take risks and end up losing other people's money. So in that, given that that led you to creating the book, what points or what signs did you see in your life when you decided that you were feeling a bit stressed or you were feeling overwhelmed that you wanted to um, write that book about the element of play to help you, I believe, to help you recover? Is that right?
Yeah. So what's really interesting is I had a pretty tough time quite a few years ago. I'm now divorced, and just like any relationship, I mean, I would say that my problems are certainly not as bad as others, and yet they're worse than some, right? So
Yeah.
when I was going through divorce, I just found it a really tough time. I didn't see that coming either, actually. So it was very it's then you start analyzing absolutely everything, right? So in your own life, and it doesn't matter whether it's relationships or friendships or work or finance, it's anything. So anything can become a stressor, right? And I think that's first and foremost the first point, because actually it doesn't matter what happens, any kind of stress or traumatic event can create a result. And everyone's results or responses are very, very different to each other. So you can look at someone's event and how they responded, and that might not ever be the same that you did. But when I was going through this stage, again, I started analyzing absolutely everything in my life and thought, what could I have done better? Who am I as a person? Now, what's interesting is kind of during this phase as well, I'd already joined Homeward Bound, which is the Women in Leadership in STEM program that you mentioned at the start. And there's a lot of activities about values exercises and better understanding internally and externally. How do you lead? How do you like to be led? How do you communicate? All of these things. So I already knew that I was on a path of like I kind of understand where I'm going. I understand my internal systems. We can all do better, but I have a bit of an understanding as to who I am as a person. And what was really interesting is I was like, I need to get out. I need to move. I need connection. So connection is a key driver for me. So funnily enough, I ended up at an acrobatic workshop. It's called Acro or Partner Acrobatics. I turned up knowing nothing about it, and I have never felt so sore in so many body parts I didn't even know I had. And like it was amazing. If you haven't tried it, doesn't matter who you are, I highly recommend. And the reason being is like, if you think about the key things that you want in life of any relationship and for you personally, right? I love things like you need to be able to trust other people. You need accountability because you want people to be there and you want them, if something happens, that they can stand up for it. You want to be able to be caught if you fall. You definitely want laughter and you want connection and communication actually. And so when I went to this course, like you are falling, right? It's not very pretty. It's not graceful at all. You're falling over, you're getting bruises, you're rolling around on the ground, you're laughing with each other, and you're in very precarious positions that you didn't necessarily think you would because you're off the ground, right? You're always one person is always off the ground. So it is quite hilarious to watch. And yet the growth out of that is exponential because you start off as an absolute beginner and you very quickly become great at the basics. But what I realized, even if that first one, as I walked out, I'm like, you have to trust the other person that they'll hold you. You have to be able to fall and know that someone will either catch you or that someone's watching you and will help you get back up. Often, what happens if you don't get a move, someone's like, oh, actually, that was my fault. I'll try something different, and vice versa. So you've got this beautiful accountability, and your laughing and connection is integral. You're actually communicating often just with hands, so that a tiny movement will be like, I'm ready to go. And also, you have to say, are you okay? Are you ready? So it's very clear communication and consent with everything. So as I walked out of this first class, I genuinely felt lighter than I had in absolutely months in the lead
Wow.
up. And I realized that actually, what was the key ingredient, right? Why was that so much fun? And I'm like, it's so playful. I have not, it's like, it's that feeling of being a kid and climbing a tree, right? You love it because it's
Yeah.
explorative and there's all these other elements. And I just walked out going, this is the key to life. This acrobatic stuff is the
Wow.
key to life. And so once I started unpacking those key components, I realized that actually playfulness is the key ingredient that I've been missing. And when I realized that and started building that back in, I was so much better so quickly because I was purposely putting play into every day.
Wow, that's amazing. So you said the elements are trust, communication, and
Accountability
accountability,
and laughter.
and laughter. Okay,
Yeah.
wow. Okay, they're really powerful, and really good things. And I think back to my time when I was working as a tradie, it's like when I worked in a good crew of people, they were all parts of what it was like to work on that crew. You know that you'd all work together. You know you could trust each other. You know you had a good laugh, and you know that you would be accountable to each other and do do a good job. That's really amazing. In Prevention is always cheaper than a repair, right? So in the business that I run, the ratio of prevention, well, if we do a breakdown, it costs about three times more than doing it in a planned state. Okay, so we want to plan the maintenance in the equipment that we look after, and we want to do it in a planned state rather than getting to a breakdown. So in terms of your marine science, and what's the cost of reef restoration versus reef protection?
Yeah, that's actually super interesting and that's a very hot topic actually. So the reality is that reef restoration is consistently occurring everywhere, all over the place, right? But I would say one of the key parts is, as you mentioned, like if you're not fixing the problem A, upstream, and B, before it happens, then actually the cost of restorative activities are way higher. So I've been a part of restoration for the past few years, actually, and some of the very, very, very large scale restoration activities you might have heard about on the Great Barrier Reef. We've been a part of that with a lot of the community engagement, but also actively going out at night, head torches on, literally staying up at night trying to wait for the coral spawn. And then you go out there with these pool
Wow.
scoops and you literally capture it. You put them in big pools, you stay there for a week and redeploy. Sounds interesting, super fascinating to do. But if you think of just the amount of people and the resources required to have out on the reef at any one time, it's millions and millions of dollars, right? So it's something that is potentially has to happen for the future. But you're right. What's happening upstream? What's happening now? What can we do? Because that is not the only solution. And I would actually say, really, it's always about having heaps of tools in the box, right? You can't just use one thing. We've talked about financial components as well. Like you need to diversify. You need to diversify to make sure you are safe, but also start analyzing what happened upstream or what happened first. Because as you mentioned, prevention is always better than trying to chase your tail for a cure afterwards.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah. And in terms of finance, personal finance, what's the real cost of ignored debt versus managed debt? I have a few parcels of debt that I work with at the moment. Most of it is on appreciating assets, but I also have some small debt that's related to some renos I did in one of my properties. So it's not what you would normally call good debt, but I'm using it for the advantage of writing off the interest cost in that as well. So in terms of finances, do you what's the real cost of ignored debt? Have you ever had situations in your life when you've ignored debt and it's become a problem, or are you super really good with your finances?
Well, I mean, let's be honest. There's one part that I'm not very good with at all, obviously. And one of the lessons I did take out of all of that again was really I am the first one to admit that I am not a numbers person. I love data, but I don't, it takes me a little bit longer to understand some things and concepts. It's not, I'm a marine scientist. So my brain is very science focused and very adaptive, but numbers and certain acronyms, etc., can get lost on me. So for me, it takes me a bit longer to sit through things and make sure I have a thorough understanding. And I always say I'm a scientist at heart. I love diving deep to understand things. So, what I was really interested in is after all of this happened, I had said, like, I need help, which for starters is a really big thing to
Yeah.
ask for, actually,
Yeah.
for a lot of people. But I was like, I need help to A, understand where I'm at, and B, to go to the next step. So, I would say, I have always had a credit card. Lots of people don't like credit cards. I've always had one. I have always, for as long as I can remember, maybe I didn't as a early 20-year-old, but I've always paid it off in full,
Oh, yeah.
always.
Great.
with the exception of probably when I travel. I was away for 6 months, and so I didn't probably pay that off in full then. Um, but I've always tried to pay it off in full just so that I know that that is not a debt to me. When I bought a car, apparently I've been told otherwise since, but I've always paid for a car off. I've saved up and paid it off in full because my personal opinion is I don't want that as something that I have to pay off bit by bit. I'd rather know that I've got the funds there and pay it off. So there are
So,
some
so just
things
to
that I think,
clarify that point, did you say
yeah,
you got a car loan and paid off quickly, or did you say you pay for your car with cash?
I paid in full for the car in one
Oh,
hit. I
right,
did
okay.
not get a loan for it. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I've, and again, potentially not I've been told since that it's potentially smarter not to do that. But in my head, I was like, well, I think it's very generational as well as to how you grew up, who you grew up with, also what your heritage is. So my heritage is German and Scottish. So I would say for starters, very tight with money, but also understanding where it is and coming from a background there was war, etc. They were very not opulent, right? It was always about what are the essentials. And so I think that has really embedded in how I think about things. So for me, I have not had a huge debt with the exception of a home loan. I do own a home and I have now brought on a financial planner to assist with any of that super stuff, but also everything else because at the moment, sitting still doing nothing won't get me anything. So it is definitely a bit scary taking those additional steps because for me, I think it's taking on that little bit of risk, but understanding what that comfort zone is with risk and also financial components. What can I actually afford? As you mentioned, with renovations or a new property, etc., there does come a lot of additional expenses to think about, which also means what does that mean you're going to have to cut back on, right? And I don't want to cut back on all of the things that, again, I enjoy, but also from a mental health perspective, play has to be for first and forefront for me as well. So there's no point in having better finances if I don't go out, don't see my friends, sit in a dark room because I don't want to use the electricity, right? So there's all of these elements that have to come into it as well.
That's really important, that point you made about still enjoying your life. You've got to manage your finances in such a way that you can do everything you need to do, like have a house, pay for electricity, blah, 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 but still be able to enjoy yourself as well. That's really important because I think you already made the point. Your mental health is so important, and we get strength from doing things that we enjoy. I love riding my mountain bike, so I go and do that on the weekend, and that gives me strength, to get through the rest of the week. Someone might say. But also with the analogy of your car story, I think you did the right thing because you did what was right for you. There are many ways of doing the car thing, and I think if you're buying it out of your own personal finances, you're not carrying any debt. That's a good thing. And if you can afford to pay for it in one lump sum, then that's perfect. If you're running a business, for example, you can offset the cost of interest if you borrow money to buy a car. So that might be a different reason why you might do it differently. But I think you've made a great choice there with what you did because it's still a valid option, but it's one that works for you. You've said that it's part of your heritage, and that's really important. Now, in the kind of work that I do, maintenance planning and looking after machinery, we have scheduled routines and scheduled inspections. So we go out on a regular basis, once a week, once a month, have a look around, make sure things work in the way it's supposed to. In terms of your finances, do you have a routine where you check your pay cycle? Do you check your pay slip every cycle? Do you check your bank balance? Do you keep an eye on that on a regular basis? Do you do anything like that?
So I'm in an interesting position. I'm actually a general manager of the company. So I am responsible for doing the payroll anyway. So I definitely have an idea of how much we're spending. So from that perspective, finances are quite interesting, right? Because now it's from the very, very top, understanding what we have to work with. And because we're actually a not-for-profit, we're very tightly associated with different milestones. So
Wow.
from a business perspective, I'm very aware of what things cost and how much things cost and how much I can actually attribute to any particular component. And then personally, I just know, again, I like to pay things off in full because then for me when it comes to either tax time or anything else I can very easily track everything, so probably not as often as I should, let's be honest, it's always one of those, but I do go into my statements and I do actually online banking and attribute everything, so I want to be able to
Oh, yeah.
track where I'm actually spending my money and what on, just in case, like especially when, yeah, going for a new home loan or refinancing. all of that is gone through with a bit more of a fine tooth comb. So I want to make sure that I'm on top of it. And when people can question things, it's like, yep, well, this is the spending for this, and I'm not prepared to go down on that or etc. So I would say probably every 6 months, which is probably not often enough to keep as on top of it as I would like. But certainly I do actually, again, having learnt those lessons, I really do want to know where they're coming in. And what I did find is actually all of a sudden I've got these subscriptions that I didn't realize I was still paying for, right? That's a really great exercise to go,
Yeah.
right. It was pulled up by the financial planner. Hey, you spent X on this kind of category. Like that's more than the average. It's actually on education was
Wow.
my biggest spending. And I'm like, well, I've got to be honest, I'm probably not going to pull that back too often because I do still believe that our mind is one of the strongest things we have. And if we're not growing, we're very slowly dying. So instead, I would like to consistently push myself there. So it's again looking at subscriptions in particular and then going, okay, well, can I not learn quite so much this year? Or maybe focus on the things we've got in practice. So there is a few little bits that I definitely try and do.
Okay, so that sounds like a conscious choice there, your subscription for learning things. And that's you've chosen that you want to spend that amount, whatever that is, the X amount, which is maybe higher than the average, but so what if that's what you choose and you're able to
Mm.
do that, and that's a good thing. And I think absolutely investing in ourselves is very important because we need to grow and educate ourselves. Are you saying that there's potentially education things you're subscribing to you're not getting the full use of? Is that what you were saying, or do I misunderstand that?
No, that's definitely part of it. There are subscriptions just in general, like whether that's streaming services, etc., that maybe I wasn't using. And so I have consciously chosen to turn those off. And then, secondly, yes, with the educational components, I've certainly signed up for some, and they have most often have that reoccurring bill, right? It might only be annually. So it's a point of me going in and going, I love the concept still, but if I have not really used that in a year, it's not really worth it because they do usually come with quite a high price tag. So especially this year is exactly what I did is I've just recently gone through and gone, I love this, but it's not for me right now. If I'm not using it, there's no point in paying for it just in case I will
Yeah,
access it later. So I might come
to
back to that later, or maybe I've gone in a different direction.
totally. I watched a YouTube video once. It was an engineering channel because I get into all that geeky engineering stuff. And at the end, they did a call to action. Said, if you like this, subscribe to this education service. I thought, oh, that's really good. I'll subscribe to that. And I'll put it on my iPad. And when after work, when I'm in mining camp and I've got time on my hands, I'll look at it. And I went a whole year and didn't look at it once. And fortunately, I got a reminder to say that, I'm going to charge my card again. I went, nah, I've got to get rid of that. Which is yeah, I thought it was a good idea at the time, but I didn't get any value from it.
Which
So
also
there's,
is something for you though, right? Like as you said, it's really easy because you get rolled up in the energy of things and going, yeah, I loved that. And then you say yes, but if you, I think that's a beautiful conscious choice for you as well, though. The fact that you went, oh, hang on. Well, actually, two things. One, the company reminded you that the money was coming out, which I would say kudos to them because not everybody does. And then
yep,
you have to chase your tail to get the money back. But secondly, you noticed and were like, hang on, I have not done what I thought I would do with this. And so that conscious choice of then saying, no, I'm going to cancel it now is actually really important because then it shows a, whether you have time for certain things and whether you need to allocate more time to certain things that you want to do,
yeah.
and B, whether it's actually helping you in the long run.
Yeah, 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 and yeah, it's so important to prioritize what you do with your time. And I had prioritized it for other things, and so yeah, I never took
Yeah.
advantage of that. So, Jody, if you were talking directly to a tradie who's running hard, working long rosters, and starting to feel like he's going through the motions, what would you say to him?
I would say first and foremost, stop, right? And when I say stop, it doesn't mean that you have to stop everything cold turkey. It's more like stop, just take a breath. First and foremost, understand what is important to you. When was the last time you smiled or laughed or like really had that like dance in the kitchen or chase your dogs around kind of feeling? What is going on? And how can you actually change that? Because the thing is, as you've mentioned previously, burnout can really just sneak in, right? You don't necessarily know that it's happening until you realize you're really exhausted. You're super burning the candles at both ends. You're up early, you're up really late, you're not actually going anywhere. So you think you're doing all of this traction, but actually it's just putting time. And you mentioned it earlier that time is the one thing everyone has, right? So you just mentioned time as a key component, and that's true because we all have the exact same amount of time in a day. So where are you allocating that? So for a tradie or anyone else, like where are you putting your time? Are you happy? Are you joyous? Are you playful? And what's one simple, tiny thing that you can do today that will bring a smile to your face? Because once you realize what that is, that's a clue. And when you can start packing up those clues together, you're back on your way to a more playful life.
Wow, that's a really powerful message, Jody. Thanks for that. I would agree with that in almost entirely in terms of your finances. If you feel like you're in the same situation with the finances where you feel like you're going through the motions, you're not getting anywhere, you can't get attraction, the first piece of advice is stop, have a look at what's going on, and just take stock of where you're at. And then the next thing you can do is you can make one small change. And as soon as you make one small change, you're taking control and you're starting to feel like you're back in charge again. And that makes a huge difference. Here's what I want you to take away from today. The same instincts that make you good at your job, noticing when something isn't right, acting on it early, not waiting until it becomes a breakdown. Those are exactly the instincts you need with your money. You already have them and you do them every day on site. The question is whether you're bringing them home with you. Start small, look at your last pay cycle, open your super statement, check your credit card interest line. Just look. That's your inspection routine. That's where it starts. Before we close today, Jody, I believe you've got a book, and where can people go to buy your book if they want to get a copy?
Yeah, thank you. If anybody's interested in learning more, it is called The Element of Play. Head on over to elementofplay.com. There's a heap of free resources. There's an anti-burnout blueprint there that you can have for free as well. And you have early access to that book as well. It's just about to go live, so please feel free, read through, pick up some hot tips, and please feel free to share with either your friends or someone that you might know that needs to be just a little bit more playful in their life.
So did you say that's the elementofplay.com?
Elementofplay.com.
Excellent. And there's free resources there.
There is definitely plenty of free resources. There's some blogs as well. So please feel free to have a look through any of that. And or as always, reach out if you have any questions or want to know more.
Thank you, Jody. I really appreciate your time today. Thanks for joining me on the podcast. And to all my listeners, I hope to see you again on the next podcast. Thank you very much.
That was the podcast from Pay to Work for Tradies with David Kennington. More information at tradiesearn.com. That's tradiesearn.com.